Millions of Canadians saw the 1972 Summit Series on television. This shared experience was uniquely Canadian. Now, Canada Post is celebrating that experience with a stamp.
I was in grade 2.
I was giving a lecture.
I remember as a young kid at 15 years of age having skipped out from school and riveted by the TV with family and friends.
J'avais 15 ans. On était au début de notre secondaire 4.
Quand j'ai vu le match, j'étais chez moi à la maison. Évidemment, la famille au complet regardait le match.
It was the first time that Canada's best pros played the Soviet Union's national team. The 8 games were an emotional roller coaster for Canadians. The entire country, schools, factories, offices, shut down to watch Game 8, which would decide the outcome. Canada Post asked some prominent Canadians to share their memories.
Just with a few seconds left to go, everybody exploded out of their seats and we were just so thrilled, so filled with pride that our country, was able to succeed.
The entire school was brought into the gymnasium where we all sat cross-legged on the floor watching a small television screen on a rolling audiovisual cart. I have to admit that at 8 years old, I wasn't really that into hockey, but I definitely preferred it to math class. I've never forgotten it.
Look at that. Paul Henderson sweater from the 72 Summit Series. Okay, it's not the real one, but it's close enough for me to remember exactly where I was on that day. I was at a school in Winnipeg as a young reporter covering the story by watching kids watch the game. You can imagine, when Paul Henderson scored the winning goal, the place went bonkers. So did much of the country. And for good reason. It wasn't just about sports. It wasn't just about a hockey game. At that time, the Soviet Union was our sworn enemy. We were in the middle of the Cold War. It was just 10 years since the Cuban Missile Crisis. So when Canada won that game, there was a lot more than just hockey involved.
Lorsque Paul Henderson a marqué le but gagnant, lorsque le match s'est terminé, je me rappelle encore comme si c'était aujourd'hui de la réaction spontanée dans notre classe de chimie. Tout le monde s'est levé, pratiquement debout sur les tables et sur les pupitres pour applaudir, pour crier, pour chanter, pour danser pratiquement.
On sautait partout, c'était vraiment l'euphorie parce que on attendait, c'était difficile, ce tournoi-là avait été très difficile, donc lorsque Paul Henderson a compté ce but-là, c'était l'euphorie.
On the day of the game, my school closed early and I watched from home with 2 friends. When Paul Henderson scored, we all started shouting, "Henderson, Henderson." I was still shouting that when I ran into the balcony and decided to jump onto the sidewalk below. Only problem was that a street crew had just laid fresh cement during the game.
They sent me as a photographer. At the last few minutes when the game was tied, all the Canadian photographers, including myself, were at the far end of the arena focused on Tretiak, the Russian goalie, hoping Canada would score. Well, I'm looking at this and there's nobody down at the other end. So I rushed down the other end just in case the Russians scored to get a photograph. So unlike 16 million Canadians who were watching the game on television, I missed the Paul Henderson goal.
When Game 1 started, it was early September. We were actually camping as a family in Kejimkujik National Park in southwest Nova Scotia. We actually watched the game on a little black and white 10-inch portable TV, and we were seized with it and watching every play. But then we realized this wasn't going the way we thought and expected, and I literally couldn't watch the last 5 minutes when they lost to the Soviet Union. So when Game 8 rolled around, we were completely focused on this, my friends, my family, and we were at school that day, and I think it was early afternoon, and the phys ed teacher, Ed Morgan, who had coached me in minor hockey, opened up the gymnasium for everybody in the school. This was a rare occasion, actually, to do that. For all of us to watch on a little audiovisual TV, we were packed in there like sardines, and you could hear a pin drop as the game was going on, particularly in the third period.
So I was giving a lecture on September 28th, and everybody was listening intently, and then suddenly I noticed there was a ripple that went through my class. Now this is a big class, hundreds of kids, but this is before we had cell phones or any of that stuff. Somebody knew that Paul Henderson had scored a goal, and it just rippled through that class. I had no idea what the hell was going on. They were tuned in, and that goal created a sensation.
50 years later, Henderson's goal is a memory that transcends sport.
I think it gave us a sense that Canada can do anything it wants to once it sets its mind to. Helped inspire me as a youth to believe that anything was possible. And I know it helped change the nation, and we really truly came to embrace hockey as our sport.
We're proud of that moment, and we still are 50 years later.
Il y a eu beaucoup d'innovations par la suite, de par les entraîneurs, de par les joueurs, la façon de s'entraîner. Donc je pense que c'était très, très positif. Cette série-là a vraiment marqué le hockey au Canada.
It absolutely brought Canadians together like I'd never seen before, and of course I was young. But the underdog had won in terms of our global presence, and we were elevated as a country, almost lifted in terms of our pride.
Years and years later, I had the privilege to interview Paul Henderson on camera, and I remember my dad wanted to carry the tripod just so he could meet him. Paul Henderson, you made us proud then, and you never stopped.